Hello everyone and welcome back. In this video I'll explain how to write the method section. So the number of paragraphs usually depends on the study design. It usually ranges between 3 to 6 paragraphs, and sometimes it can only be one paragraph. It includes the following. You need to talk about the study design, so mention if it's cross-sectional, retrospective, prospective, etc. Also, you need to report the setting or the location where was the study conducted, and talk about the participants. So you want to mention the inclusion-exclusion criteria if there was any exclusion criteria, and the variables collected. You don't want to talk about all of the variables, only the most relevant ones, because most of the variables, if not all of them, are going to be found in the tables or figures in the results section. You also want to mention the data measurements, so if you use a questionnaire or data collection sheet, and you want to reference the study you used as well. So also you want to talk about the study size or the sample size and how it was reached. I'll show you later how to use the raw soft sample size calculator. You also need to mention the IRB approval statement and also mention the statistical analysis. So here's an example of a method section that I've wrote. So here I have included 3 paragraphs. So in the first paragraph I talk about the study design. This was a cross-sectional study design. Then I talk about the setting. It was conducted in our college, in our university, in 2 campuses. Then I mention here the inclusion criteria and the exclusion criteria. And one thing to notice, that when you have an exclusion criteria, you want to add a justification for why did you exclude those kind of participants, for example. Then we talk about the data measurements. So here I use 2 questionnaires and I have referenced them. So sometimes a questionnaire or data collection sheet may have a name, so you can just write it down and you want to make sure to cite it as well. Then I talk about the survey and the section it had, and how each section investigate different things. Then I talk a little bit more about the survey itself. So it used a 5 Likert scale, as you can see here, and it ranged between strongly disagree to strongly agree. Then I talk about the relevant variables, as you can see, the gender, year of study, and previously published research. So some journals, if not all of them, they require you to state when did you collect the data, from which date to which date. So keep that in mind. Usually if you use a Google form, for example, or an Excel, it will have the date between the first variable and the last variable. Then here we talk about the sample size and how it was calculated, taking into consideration the possible non-response rate and the actual population in both campuses. Then we have this number. Considering the margin of error and confidence interval, those 2 are usually fixed between different study. Then we had the IRB approval statement. So we had our IRB from King Abdullah International Medical Research Center, and you can write the study number between parentheses. And in the last paragraph, you talk about the statistical analysis. Again, this is usually done by your biostatistician, but you would use you would state which software that you used and how was your variables presented as well. Then you would talk about the statistical tests that you have used and what was the p-value, what did you assign as a significant p-value. So let me show you here how you can use a sample size calculator. So you can look up raw soft sample size calculator. It's the first one. Usually the margin of error is fixed, the same with confidence interval, and for the population you want to know exactly what was your population. So our population was 1,627 participants, and this is the recommended sample size. This means that if I collected more than this number, it may not make a significant difference in my results. So the aim here is to collect the same number or even more. You're expected to exceed the number for example, the number that you're collecting. So if it's 311 participants, you want to strive to have more than this number, not less, because this would be considered as a limitation. So I think the main concept here that if you had, for example, 500 or 1000 participants, it wouldn't make much of a difference than a statistical difference than this number. So always strive to have a larger sample size if possible, and it would be considered as a limitation if you had, for example, less. So for example, let's say you had 300 or 290. So this is slightly a limitation, but if you had, for example, less than 100, then this is a huge limitation as well. So keep that in mind as well. So let's try to compare between the method section that I've wrote and if I used the STROBE checklist correctly or not. So as you can see, here they mentioned the study design. It was mentioned here. We talked about the setting exactly, the participant inclusion exclusion criteria, the variables we have mentioned as well, the data sources or measurements. For the bias, we might have not addressed it, so this is a limitation. For the study size, we have calculated using the raw soft as well. Quantitative variables, how were they handled? So we talked about this here as well. And for the statistical method or the statistical test that we used, we mentioned it here as well. So I hope this can be helpful to writing the method section. It's usually the easiest to write, so don't worry about it and just write exactly what you have done. Just like you wanted another researcher to replicate your study, so you'd write exactly what did you do exactly. So it's like a recipe. And hope you find this helpful, and best of luck.